you have any questions, please just put them in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and turn your camera on or off if you'd like, because we'd really, want to encourage as many kind of conversations around this as we can. So I guess I would just like to welcome all of you to the first of 4 Ask an Advocate sessions. These are going to be on Monday afternoons over the next 4 weeks. And we're having them because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And we just really want to make everyone aware of the resources and people in our community and surrounding area that are really there for victim survivors and to learn how to support our victim and survivors. So today we have Gabi Schwartz, and I am just so excited to talk to you. Did you want to start by just introducing yourself and your pronouns and what you do, where you're from?
Yeah. So as Beth said, my name is Gabi Schwartz. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am typically the Sexual and Interpersonal Violence Prevention Coordinator here at UW Oshkosh. There's been a few changes just because COVID likes to mess with things. I have officially been at UW Oshkosh for 2 years now. My education background, I have my master's in public health. So I went to Boston University where I studied health policy and law and focused a lot on violence prevention, trauma-informed care, and Title IX background and how it applies to universities. Yeah. Oh, Beth, you're on mute.
Oh, okay. There we go. Thank you. Welcome. And I guess maybe I can just start with a question and we can kind of go from there. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. So as an advocate for victim survivors, what exactly would you say your job is? What are your duties? Can you speak for them a little bit?
Yeah. So advocacy is different than counseling or therapy, but I do provide one-on-one support for students who have experienced sexual and interpersonal violence. And a lot of times that support is about being a listening ear, being someone who students can talk to, who understands what they've been through and where they're coming from regarding their experience with sexual and interpersonal violence. So I'll have students who say, well, I haven't told my friends, I haven't told my family, so they don't understand why this certain event is upsetting for me. But because they've told me, I can understand where they're coming from in a way that maybe somebody who doesn't know their experience wouldn't. So I meet with students one-on-one a lot of times to talk through what they've been through and what they want to do going forward. Some students are like, we've met once, I've told somebody, I'm good, don't need to meet again, I don't need to talk to anybody else about it, that's fine. Really, my job is to meet students where they're at and support them however they want. So if they just want that one meeting where someone listens to them, that's just fine. Sometimes I meet with students multiple times because we're going through a reporting process. So I help students work through the university reporting process through Title IX. And what that looks like is if a student decides to self-report or if they tell somebody who is not confidential on campus and it gets reported to the university, students have an option to go through an investigation process. As part of that process, they get to have an advocate. So I can go to any of those meetings with them. I can ask for some accommodations for them through the Dean of Students office. They're like, I'm struggling in this class, or I'm not comfortable staying in this residence hall anymore. Kind of navigating those structures that are in place and kind of seeking what changes can be made to help the student feel safest in this moment. I also work with students who are reporting through the legal system. So meeting with law enforcement, If they go have a medical exam, Aurora in Oshkosh and then Theta Care in Neenah and Appleton has a SAAM program, so a sexual assault nurse examination program, which does forensic nursing and evidence collection for individuals who've experienced sexual and interpersonal violence. We do have an event coming up later in April, maybe in 2 weeks, that will speak more to what happens at SAAM exams, what that program does, how it's used. And so I would highly encourage attending that. But I can go with students to those appointments to have someone that they know who's just there to be a support. I've met with students who are like, here's an advisor that I'm close with, but we want to talk about this. Or sometimes students bring a friend. I would never tell a student, nope, it just has to be the two of us talking. You can't bring anybody else. It's hard to bring like a professor or a staff or faculty member because they're not confidential. But students have brought a friend, a roommate, someone they're close to who's like, okay, I need someone else to just be here because I know them and it's my first time meeting you and I don't know about you yet. That's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis when I'm not doing prevention.
Does anybody have any questions for Gabi and kind of what she does and what you want to know more about?
Beth, you're on mute.
Okay, I will get this. Alicia is asking, why do you use both victim and survivor as terms?
Yeah, that is something that I learned when I did my internship at the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, where we use both terms, kind of victim / survivor, that allows the person to choose how they identify. I don't want to tell someone that they've been a victim. And I don't want to tell someone, wow, you survived this, if they're like, I don't feel like I've survived. And so it's a way to be inclusive and to allow individuals to choose how they identify. So that's been my preference. And I feel like I kind of brought that to UWO. So that's pretty fun to have seen other folks across campus adopt that terminology.
That is a great explanation. And in the chat, someone asked, how do you brainstorm ideas for something like SAAM, Sexual Assault Awareness Month?
With a lot of help. This year's SAAM programming was planned with myself and several others across campus. So Beth, some of our student employees, our violence prevention educators, Alicia in the Women's Center, and then with some of our community partners. So Reach Counseling, Sexual Assault Crisis Center, Aurora, a lot of us bringing ideas to the table to really talk about what's going to meet the needs of our community and our students. The other thing is students enjoy bringing ideas to me. And so I had a student reach out and was like, hey, I did a research project on this and I think it's an important conversation. Can we do a program on it? And so that's a way for me to loop in some of our violence prevention educators. Alicia's interns in the Women's Center have been super helpful with programming, where we say, okay, this is a theme, this is an idea. How can we work with this? What can we make from this? And we also try to cover a lot of topics with our programs. So we're doing our Ask an Advocate series for students to understand what it is that we all do, what some of our community service providers do. But we're also doing programs on consent, programs on activists in the movement. There's a few programs that we're advertising through the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault to do programs on healing from trauma. So really kind of covering a wide range of things that fall within sexual assault awareness and prevention and education.
That's really great. And they also added, I wanted to add a word that I've seen and enjoy, and that is thriver. That's a good one. And I think that, Gabby, if I'm hearing you right, that's, you just want to be able to have the student use whatever word they choose to kind of what they identify, how they handled their situation.
Yeah, how they identify with their experience. And sometimes students might start out being like, I feel hurt, I'm really angry, and they feel like a victim. And later in their healing journey, they might feel more like a survivor. They might not. So it does change. I've also seen programming do like survivor to thriver, to then kind of articulate more individuals' healing journeys. So it really does depend. It's a term that I think we use more often when we're doing prevention and awareness education, so that we're not standing in front of a group and continually using the same word, or making individuals feel like victims. They're like, oh, that's just not something that's resonated. So it's also a way to connect with individuals.
Yeah, in the chat, it also says ideas can also come from national networks like the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, which is a really great resource all around. If you guys want to check it out, there's lots of good things on there. But yeah, I would
with one program quick that they're doing that I love. They do their 30 Days of SAAM Instagram challenge. And so they give us a calendar with different topics and things to post about. And so individuals and organizations will post throughout the month. And so if you follow hashtag 30 Days of SAAM on Instagram, you can see all sorts of people across the country doing different posts about organizations they love, how they stay grounded, how they're healing, how they're coping with the world. So that's one of my favorite programs. But then we also saw them, especially last year, launch larger webinar series events because of COVID, and that has continued into this year. And so they have, sorry, my street's a little noisy. They have a lot of programs that anybody in the country can join. So that's really awesome.
Courtney asked, can you talk through the process of reporting on campus? Great question.
Yeah. So we have two reporting forms on our campus. We have our confidential reporting form and we have an official reporting form. Those can both be found on my webpage. The confidential form can be used by students predominantly because staff and faculty are responsible employees or mandated reporters. So the confidential form goes to myself and it goes to the director of the counseling center. That's a way for students to share an experience and get support services. So that connects students with me, and I'll reach out and I'll say, hey, I saw this. Do you want to meet to chat? If not, like, that's okay too. But I'm here, and here are some ways that I might be able to help you if these are options you're looking at. And similarly, the counseling center, I'll reach out to see if a student wants to talk about that experience. The official reporting form goes to a handful of people, including our Title IX coordinator, the Dean of Students office, the Office of Equity, EOEA, Equal Opportunity, Equity, and Affirmative Action. And when and that's the form that staff and faculty would use. Students can also use that. That's the form that would be used if a student was looking for a Title IX investigation, if they were looking to have the respondent be held accountable. And so when that report is filed, when it involves a student, the Dean of Students office is going to reach out to that student to say, again, hey, we saw this. If you would like to talk through your experience, if you want to do an investigation, here are some options. And they call it an investigation, but the Dean of Students office really is good about it being a conversation. So I've sat in those meetings, and when you meet with someone from the Dean of Students office, they're often asking, tell me what happened. And they might ask some follow-up questions. In an investigation, they're really looking to build a timeline of events. And so they might say, oh, wait, tell me what day was this? And kind of getting that order of events. And they're going to ask to talk to any witnesses. So if you talk to a friend right after, if your roommate came home, they might ask to talk to them as well. And they'll talk to the respondent or the person who has caused you harm, kind of to get their side. The thing about university investigations versus a legal investigation is that the burden of proof, or like the level of evidence required, is much lower for a university because it's not a criminal process. So on a university campus, they use a preponderance of evidence, which is, some people like to say 49% to 51%, but it's really just enough to tip the scale in one direction, versus the standard of proof for criminal legal process is beyond a reasonable doubt, which is like a 95%. So that's much harder to prove. And those meetings that happen with the Dean of Students office, those are meetings that students can take an advocate to. That advocate doesn't have to be me. Juliana Kars is also one of our confidential advocates on campus. It doesn't have to be her. People can bring a friend. You can bring a professor who you're really comfortable with, or an advisor that you feel supported by. That's okay, because that's not a confidential process. So those individuals could be involved. And I've had students say, well, I want to talk to you about this, but my roommate's going to be there with me because they're my support person, and that's okay.
So one of the comments in the chat was, we had to find those forms, the ones that you were talking about, for an assignment for school, and I was struggling pretty hard to find them. So I wish they would be more visible, as someone who is upset may not be thinking as clearly.
I think we are going to screenshot that comment and send it to the marketing department and other entities on campus, because we have been advocating for those to be closer to the homepage or on more department sites, because it is hard to find. And you're right, who's going to know where to look in the moment when they're upset and frustrated. So I appreciate that comment, and I think that will help to bolster our efforts to have those buttons be more present on our website. I knew Alicia would be on the screenshot.
Does anyone else have any more questions about the reporting process? It looks like someone might be typing. We'll just give it another minute here. What are some of the outcomes of campus reporting process? Sanctions, accommodations, etc. Great question.
Yeah. Suspension is an option in a reporting process. If the respondent is found responsible, suspension is an option. I would say that's often a route that the Dean of Students looks to go if someone's held responsible, but different sanctions include, or accommodations, I guess, would be class changes, or housing restrictions. So the Dean of Students office is able to put in place a no contact order throughout the investigation process, so that the respondent and the victim survivor can't communicate with each other, or aren't supposed to talk to each other. And that's a two-way thing. So nobody contacts anybody, but they can also do residence hall restrictions. So if the victim survivor lives in one residence hall, they can make sure that the respondent doesn't have swipe card access to that that building, so that the student feels safe. Some sanctions would be I can't keep reading the comments while answering the questions. I'm getting distracted. I'll leave that to Beth. Other sanctions, some students aren't allowed to return to UW system schools. The suspension is a UW system wide. The reporting process, sanctions are usually established in what the Dean of Students office calls a settlement, where they will say, okay, these are the options of what we can do. And the victim survivor could say, I'm comfortable with this option. I'm comfortable with the suspension. And the Dean of Students office will say, okay, but UW system suspension is limited to a 1-year time period. So if the victim survivor is a sophomore, suspension from school for a year only gets them to their junior year. They still have some time after that. So in settlements, they'll say, okay, we'll do the suspension, but you can't return to UW Oshkosh for 5 years. That would give the student time to complete their degree and feel safe while they're on campus.
So Natalie asked if you had to face any cultural barriers when interacting with students from diverse backgrounds, and perhaps these cultural barriers inhibit them from reporting or wanting to seek help, or even believing that some action was taken against them.
Absolutely. I do identify as a cis white woman. I cannot identify with or understand all the identities that all of the students hold here on campus. So that has been something that I have personally been working towards, increasing my education of different backgrounds, cultural experiences, so that I can best support the student. And sometimes that looks like connecting with outside agencies. So Alicia has helped facilitate connections with the Hmong American Women's Association, HAWA, in Milwaukee, which is an organization that works with Hmong individuals who've experienced sexual violence. So that's an organization that I have connected with so that I can increase my understanding, but that way I can also talk to them about situations. I can connect them with a student if a student feels more comfortable. Reach Counseling also has a Latina advocate. Thank you, Maria. Yes, Reach is a local sexual assault service provider who will be featured in 2 weeks, I think, on Ask an Advocate. And Reach does have a Latina advocate, and I think at one point they had another advocate, potentially an Indigenous person. But I'm not remembering that correctly. But so community organizations that have larger staffing and have that ability. Thank you. Native and African American advocates who can meet those student needs. But I think we also see cultural barriers when it comes to reporting. We know that there is a history of police brutality towards people of color. And that's not, so reporting through the legal system isn't always something that students of color are comfortable with. And that's okay. My job as an advocate is to advocate for what the student wants. So I would never tell a student that they have to report, that they have to go through a process that they don't want to. Really, they get to make that decision, and I get to respect it and support them with that decision. We are working to increase student knowledge of the position and of advocates on campus. And for me, that looks like connecting with different student organizations for students of diverse backgrounds and cultures that I don't share. For me to learn about their experiences and to also connect us so that then if a friend maybe says something or discloses, my hope is that someone can say, oh, I've met Gabi and she seems like she's a good ally and she might be able to help, or she might connect you with someone who can help. And so that has been, I would say that's a big effort for myself, as well as the rest of our advocacy and prevention team, because we know that we're not meeting all the needs of our students.
That's a great answer. Someone also wants to know, what route does it go if it's reported against a professor, and does tenure ever affect what happens?
That's a good question. So the reporting process between when it's a report of students versus students is different, or the Title IX, the investigation process is different than if it's a student versus staff or faculty. If it's versus staff or faculty, that goes through, well, we now have a Title IX coordinator who is in our human resources in our EOEAA, our Equal Opportunity, Equity, and Affirmative Action Office. And that isn't entirely, not entirely different, but it's a little bit different. And it does get a little more complicated. I have not seen tenure. I can't quite speak to the effect that tenure has on that, because it's very case by case. I'm going to wait while Alicia types. Yeah, so with tenure, the investigation likely goes through the UW system. So they pull somebody outside of campus to assist with that investigation. Similar student reach out if the report is against a professor. Students still have access to support from the Dean of Students office. You still have access to have an advocate, excuse me, with you. You can still have any of the accommodations that are available. It's just a different office that's conducting that investigation. And Alicia also added that the Board of Regents, which is a UW system entity, handles faculty dismissal, but tenure doesn't protect someone who is found guilty. And so the process of dismissal, of faculty dismissal, is different than the sanctions that happen in a student versus student Title IX investigation. Alicia also added that if an official report is filed and the investigation is being conducted, that likely that staff or faculty member would be put on administrative leave during that investigation, meaning they wouldn't be on campus at that time.
That was a great question. Anyone else would want to add to that? Looks like she says thank you.
Of course.
Well, maybe you can talk, Gabi, a little bit about some of the joys and like the positive things that you get out of your job.
I do love my job. I love working with students. I meet students at a really vulnerable time in their experience, right? I meet with students who have experienced sexual violence. And there's a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings with that, and a lot of frustrations and not sure where to go, what the student might be looking for. So I get a lot of joy out of being a person whose job is to strictly believe students. I love that. It's like the biggest perk of my job. Like, I am an advocate. My job is to advocate for students and to believe their experience. So if nobody else believes them, students can know that, like, I am one person that will be in their corner. I get to help students seek out options that they want in their healing journey. I get to help students define what healing looks like for them. Healing is not always bubble baths and yoga and feeling just fine all the time. And so I get to help students navigate that and decide, okay, for me, healing looks like I'm going to get in touch with counseling. Great, well, we can do that. I can put you in touch with campus or community resources. For some students, that looks like I need an outlet to share my story anonymously. I can connect students with that. During the Red Zone, when we're in person, we usually have a Never Silent art exhibit where students get to share their story and a local artist will turn that into an artwork piece. And that can be very healing for students to share their story, and the option to be anonymous. I absolutely noticed a change in students who feel heard and believed. And for me, it's just an honor to be able to provide that space for students to share and to feel believed. And of course, it's fantastic when an investigation goes the way a student wants it to. So we certainly celebrate those all the time when they happen.
And it looks like someone's typing a question, so I'm just gonna give it a minute here. If anyone feels better or more comfortable just raising their hand and speaking, they're welcome to do that too. While we're waiting, maybe we can talk a little bit about if we're not a victim or survivor, but we know someone who is, how can we be advocates?
Yeah. I think it's extremely important to make sure that those around you feel safe and feel believed. Whether that's someone directly disclosing to you, key things to mention are that you believe them. My favorite question is, how can I support you? I love that one because it gives the student space to decide what they need. And it gives them that control to say, I need this. I need you to check in with me, but not for a few days. It gives them that control back. It also is something that people are going to remember that you said. So I like to use it because they might not know in that moment what they need. But a few weeks later, they might be like, oh, Beth asked how she could support me. So maybe if I need this now, maybe she's someone I can ask about who I can connect with on campus. Maybe I'm ready to talk to somebody else. Maybe Beth knows how to get me connected. I also think that your actions on social media speak volumes sometimes. And this isn't me patrolling anybody's social media or anything, but if you're posting things that affirm survivors' experiences or sharing resources in the community or on campus, people are going to notice that, and they're going to see, oh, this person might understand a little bit about what trauma looks like, about what sexual violence experiences are like, or they care. Versus if you're posting things about not believing survivors, they're going to know, yep, can't talk to that person. It's very telling. And the activities that you get involved with on campus, so being a part of Sexual Assault Awareness Month programs, even being here today, right now, you all hopefully will leave knowing me and my position, right? So if someone discloses to you, you can say, well, I know that we have this person on campus, and I know that she does advocacy, and I know that she's confidential, and she can kind of help you figure out where you might want to go next. Let's see if we can connect her. And I've gotten emails from students that say, hey, Gabi, I saw you at this event, or I heard you talk at this training, and can you help me with this? That's a perfect way to connect me with students or yourself. So I think knowing resources and organizations, community and on campus, is huge in being an advocate for victims and survivors without professionally being an advocate.
Great answer. That's really good stuff that I think we can all remember, and everyone can kind of do their part when it comes to that. Yeah, like Alicia said, you're definitely not hogging the chat. Your questions are awesome, and yeah, I definitely appreciate you chiming in with us. Okay, so I'm just going to read this to you, Gabi. Put it down a little bit here. Okay, so when folx came together with UWO, I was very impressed with the amount of options given to the students. Unfortunately, the UW folx campus doesn't offer many of these opportunities, so since the merge, it's been way more open to others.
Yeah, I think, oh gosh, and Alicia could refresh my memory, but I know that I started, like, I think the year that the merge happened, like, I think it had just happened. And so not only were we trying to advertise my position, get the name out there, tell students about it, but we've been trying to figure out how can we also expand these services, because our advocacy services are also for our students at the Fox Cities and the Fond du Lac campuses. One thing that has increased with the pandemic is our virtual options. And so certainly prior to COVID, I would absolutely drive to the Fox or the Fond du Lac campus to meet with students. But getting more used to using virtual platforms has been a little bit of a benefit. I don't like to say that much about the pandemic has been a benefit, but has been a bit of a benefit in expanding our services so that I can meet with more students at all three of our campuses, because my office location is on the Oshkosh campus. And we're also working on, prior to COVID, we were slowly connecting with some student groups at both of the campuses, and we're able to go there for programs. So I think my first year in April, we did a program on the Fond du Lac campus in Sexual Assault Awareness Month, because students reached out, and it was like, well, yes, absolutely, I will come to campus to do this. So we are absolutely wanting to hear more from our students on those campuses about how we can make our services more accessible, and to have students be aware of them.
So Alicia put in the chat too that 25% of her position will be on the Access campuses starting July 1st, and she welcomes ideas and about the needs and wants for students from Fox and Fond du Lac. She dropped her email in that chat as well. So I know from personal experience that she definitely will respond to you and consider anything that you need. So definitely reach out. And she will pass all of that information on to Gabi, and Gabi, we could probably put your email in the chat as well.
Yes.
So that if anybody has any questions that maybe they don't want to share in our meeting today, but would feel more comfortable emailing you.
I will put both my personal email and then we have our general advocate email that is just seen by myself or our other advocate, Julie Cars. So either is a good way to get in touch with me. And Alicia and I talk on every social media platform possible and every way to communicate. So we definitely are big idea sharers.
So what else would folks like to know about Gabi and about what she does? Their dogs are friends. Both of them have such cute dogs.
I think we're biased and would agree that we do have cute dogs.
So as an advocate, I'm wondering if you ever experience like vicarious trauma from dealing with these kind of situations, and what do you yourself do for self-care?
I think, so yes, I think it's hard to work in a supporting role as a profession where you're hearing about people's struggles and experiences with trauma and not to have that personally affect you. I would say that, again, pre-COVID, but still working on it. Some work and home separation has been huge. So trying, not answering my emails at home, which I do now. Don't worry, don't tell people on campus that I don't answer my emails at home while I'm working from home. I do that. But when we started working from home, I had my office in my living room because I have a nice big window. And then on the weekends, I would sit on my couch and I'd stare at my desk and I was like thinking about work things. So I moved my desk back to this second room that I have, my office space, which has been super helpful to just kind of have that, like, okay, end of the day, going elsewhere. I love kickboxing. So that has been a huge for stress relieving for me. It's very wonderful to just punch a bag at the end of the day when you're really frustrated for students about what they've experienced and feeling that anger and that sadness that others are having these experiences that they don't deserve and shouldn't be a part of anyone's life experience. It has been extremely helpful to have a lot of friends on campus who also do the work. And so good check-ins of, after events or at the end of April or the red zone, when it's like, okay, we just went really, really hard with advocacy and prevention and programming for 6 straight weeks. Like, how are we doing? How are we taking a break? That has been key because those folks really understand the work just differently than family who maybe has more of a 9-to-5 job and doesn't have to think about trauma as much. And then I got a dog in COVID, and she's quite helpful. I am surprised she hasn't interrupted yet, so I apologize for those of you who joined strictly hoping to see Georgie today. She is taking quite a nap. And so getting outside and just doing things where I don't have to think about work, and just creating that separation has been really key. But I think knowing the difference that having my position on campus has made in students' lives really just makes it all worth it.
Do you have you ever experienced burnout or heard of others in your field that experience burnout?
I think it's pretty common. I think for those of us in the field, I would say something that's really helpful is having my supervisor as doing advocacy as well. And so knowing that she understands, but also, you know, someone that you can process things with, that you've heard, or if we're just having a hard time with helping a student navigate a system, kind of troubleshooting that together, but also being able to share that workload. So, and having those conversations is something that I do up front, and have been working on, where I can, and I know that I can say to Julie, like, I am at my capacity with cases right now. Like I can't give this student the time that I think they really deserve. And so we try to split student cases so that one of us isn't doing all of them and the other one's like sunshine and rainbows, like they're not stressed about anything. And they're like, how's it going over there? Trying to balance that has been really key for not running into burnout as frequently as some might. We hear a lot about burnout from overworked and understaffed organizations. So trying to just create that balance in our department has been huge.
Natalie asked, what piece of advice would you give to someone who is thinking of working in these environments in having these types of conversations?
That's a great question. I loved the classes that I took in grad school to just understand trauma, to understand prevention efforts. So when I was in grad school, I was in several different classes, and some weren't related to violence prevention, but I was able to tailor my class projects to Title IX, to a different law that has to do with violence prevention, to college prevention strategies and programming. So that way I could connect kind of all of my projects and papers on that type of project, to really increase my understanding and knowledge. And it was also something I really cared about. So I think seeking those opportunities academically, I would say that Reach and Christine Ann and ASTOP in Fond du Lac, and the Sexual Assault Crisis Center in Appleton are likely always looking for advocates, or volunteer advocates. So you can sign up to be a volunteer to answer hotline phone calls, or to meet students or community members at the hospital if someone goes there after experiencing sexual violence. And that's a great way to kind of test out if this is something that you're interested in, an experience that you're passionate about. And also the campus projects that you work on. So for instance, I have no idea if Beth is interested in this type of career, but Beth is one of our violence prevention educators, and that has been a position where, I mean, I could let Beth also share things that she has done, but where she gets to facilitate these types of programs and have these conversations, and do research on programming and documentaries, without it necessarily being a full-time job and a decision that she's like stuck with. But it's an opportunity to learn new skills and see if it's something you're interested in. And we will be hiring for violence prevention educators in the fall. This was our first year having that position, and we're hoping to have like 3 or 4 next year. So if that's something you're interested in, that is a position. So feel free to reach out to me about that, because we love students that are passionate about this type of work.
I would say it's also a great way to kind of get to see Gabi in action as well, and to kind of navigate that system from an outside view. So not necessarily dealing directly with anyone, but still learning everything that it involves. And the education and research portion, I think, is huge in the job that I do, and to just this kind of facilitating stuff is really awesome. So I would definitely recommend anybody who has any inkling they might want to do something like this to definitely talk to Gabi and go for it. Okay, so would you ever recommend someone who has experienced trauma to work in this type of field?
I think I wouldn't say it's uncommon for people who work in this field to have some sort of shared experience. Right, people are drawn to work that they care about or are passionate about. And so I think it's absolutely possible to be a victim survivor, have experienced sexual violence, and to have had that history of trauma and still work in the field. I think it's important, and oftentimes I would say work environments should and hopefully are emphasizing the self-care and the personal healing for individuals. It is definitely not a requirement to out yourself as a victim survivor in the field, but making sure that you're seeking the resources that you need. So engaging in counseling, if that's something that you participate in as part of your healing journey, to make sure that you can show up fully for the students or the individuals that you're working with. And it doesn't have to be just counseling, but whatever healing looks like for you, I think is important. But I do think it helps you be a great advocate. So.
Great questions. Is there anything else that you all want to talk about with Gabi while we have her here for a few more minutes? Yes, Alicia would really like it if you could complete this evaluation before you leave. Ooh, that's a great question. Which events are you looking forward to the most for this month?
What event am I not looking forward to? I am really excited about the work that some students that I've worked with have put in on our program called the Gray Zone. So we're exploring consent, empowerment, and societal pressures. And that is actually happening tomorrow from 7 to 8:30, and on Thursday from 7 to 8:30. So tomorrow we're able to do it in person. So we will be at Reeve, upstairs in the ballroom, having a conversation on consent, what it looks like. And what's this gray area? What makes consent feel and look gray? And then Thursday night, the event will be virtual on Microsoft Teams like this for students who Tuesday didn't work, who didn't want to do in person, who virtual is better, can't get to campus. So we're really excited to have those conversations. I am excited that we have Theta Care doing and I don't have the calendar up, so I can't even share all the dates, but maybe Alicia could share, well, we shared the link to my webpage, but maybe we could share the link to the SAAM calendar in the chat. We have Theta Care doing a talk on the overview of forensic nursing and SANE exams, and I think that'll be great education for students and staff, because not a lot of people know that that service is available in the area. Let's see, Alicia Garza is coming virtually Wednesday already. So I'm really excited for that. Sorry, Alicia, I just invited my best friend from grad school to come too. So that'll be really fun. I just saw the question about events that are being recorded. I think many of them are like our Ask an Advocate series. And on the calendar, it should mention kind of at the bottom whether or not an event will be recorded and if that recording will be available at a later date. Oh, a SAAM playlist. Look at that. I love it. We also have on our SAAM calendar, you'll notice that you're like, why are there 4 of the same events? There's an organization called the Hollowback that does some really, excuse me, some really awesome bystander intervention training. And they have some tailored to street harassment, as well as bystander intervention to stop anti-Asian / American and xenophobic behaviors. So those are all posted in our calendar with those links. They're offering several throughout the month. And since I'm part of Student Rec and Wellness, I should mention that one of my other favorite events that we're putting on is Friday the 16th, a bike roll or stroll to stop street harassment. So we're partnering with the Outdoor Adventure Center. They have free rentals for equipment to go on the wheel wash and bike, take a walk, rollerblade, to kind of just raise awareness and to stop street harassment. So those are some of the events that I'm quite excited about, but really my calendar is pretty busy because I want to go to all of them. So yes, the bike roll or stroll event is part of the Women's Adventure Outdoor Series. That's a partnership between the OAC and the Women's Center. I also saw a question about Take Back the Night. We do Take Back the Night in October as part of the Red Zone, usually kind of either during or right after. Some schools do Take Back the Night in April, but we do October. And so we did a virtual one this past year. Maybe there's some hope that it won't be virtual next year, but we shall see. But because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, Take Back the Night has historically been linked with the domestic violence awareness movement. And so that is part of why we do it in October. So I have faith that we will do one again next year.
So does anybody have any last questions for Gabi? All right, well, it is one, oh, Lots of thank yous. Yes, it's 1:40, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Gabby, for talking with us about all that you do. And I look forward to seeing everybody at all the rest of the events. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Great questions.